our webinar today. We've got two great presenters, Paul Withers and Mike McGarel, who are going to do a presentation they did at Connect back in January. First, I do have some bad news to report. Yesterday, I was kind of out of touch most of the day and came back to the computer and saw that a friend of ours, Tim Triponi, who many of you may not have known in person, but might have read his blogs or some of the other things he's posted on the web. Tim has been with the Notes and Domino community for many years. Started off, like many of us, just doing Notes apps and Lotus Script and that sort of stuff. And when XPages first came out, he really jumped on the bandwagon and became an expert in XPages. And then along the way became a Java expert. But all along that, that time, he passed on what he was learning and was always willing to help people and had, great contributions to the community. He's, presented at numerous connects and user groups and co-wrote a book, the XPages Extension Library with Paul Withers. And he also was just a great guy, just a really, he had a great smile, real friendly guy. I know, Paul, would you like to say a few things?
Yeah, I mean, I had the honor of working on the XPages Extension Library book with him and also presented with him at UK Lug in 2012, and he was always very passionate about the community and about Domino and about any technology that he was working with. In the last few months, he's been working with Android, but he's still been very active in helping people with XPages, and he'll be very sadly missed.
Yes, I agree. He's definitely going to be very much missed. There's a hole in the community. Okay, so I'm going to pass it back to Courtney, and we'll go ahead and get started. And I believe that if you want to learn more about Tim and the plan for a memorial service or other, plans that Scott Hooks has been posting some stuff on LinkedIn, so you can probably find that there. So Courtney, you should have the presentation.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm just going to get my slides started here. Okay, so I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then we'll get started with the webinar. So welcome to our May Teamstudio and TLCC webinar. I'd like to introduce the people who are just talking right now, our co-hosts Paul Delanevia and Howard Greenberg from TLCC. And I'd like to also welcome our speakers for today, Paul Withers and Mike McGarel, who will be presenting It's Not Infernal, Dante's 9 Circles of XPages Heaven. My name is Courtney. I'm the inbound marketing specialist at Teamstudio and your co-host today. Before we start talking about today's topic, I'll be taking a few moments to tell you who we are at Teamstudio, and then I'll be passing the controls to Howard at TLCC so he can do the same. So before we get started, just a few administrative things. To protect your privacy, the attendee list is not public, so you'll only see yourself as an attendee. All attendees are muted during this session, so participation will be through the chat window and Q&A panel on the WebEx ribbon on your screen. Use the chat window if you have a general question or comment, and use the Q&A panel for your questions to the speakers. We're doing Q&A at the end of the session, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point in the Q&A panel, and we'll get to it once the formal presentation has concluded. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent to you in a follow-up email in a few days. So a little bit about Teamstudio. We may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996, where we specialized in source code control, version management, and source code management. And we moved into the mobile application arena in 2010 with Unplugged. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your Notes apps out to mobile devices. The unique thing about Unplugged is that it leverages the powerful technology of XPages and provides a native app experience for the user. and these apps have the capability to function when offline. On May 2nd, we released Unplugged 3.0. This version brings Android up to speed with the improvements we made for iOS users in Unplugged 3.0. And it also offers improvements for iOS users. With Unplugged 3.1, apps run twice as fast, and development of apps is easier than ever for both Android and iOS devices. For more information on this release, check out the recent blog post on our website by Mark Dixon titled Unplugged 3.1 Rewrites XPages Android Engine. We're very proud to have been the recipient of 2 IBM Collaboration Solutions Awards for Unplugged in 2013 and earlier this year. In January of this year at the Connect conference, IBM awarded Unplugged with the Best of Show and CTO award. And at IBM Partner World in February, IBM recognized the platform as a finalist for a Beacon Award. In addition to Unplugged as a platform, we provide off-the-shelf templates like Teamstudio Continuity and OneView Approvals. An additional template called Customer View is a lightweight mobile CRM solution for your field workforce. With this, users have the ability to view, edit, and manage customer information and also have access to large media files like videos and collateral to use during sales meetings. Unplugged works on all the major platforms, and we'd be happy to arrange a demo to show you how these tools work. Looking forward, our Wireless Wednesdays webinar series continues on June 4th. Learn how to enhance your mobile enterprise applications with demos from Rich Sharp. And I'm sure Howard will cover this one a little bit later, but our next webinar with TLCC will be on June 17th with Mark Lusink on Bootstrap for XPages. Scroll to the bottom of our homepage, Teamstudio's homepage, for more information and to register for these free webinars. Lastly, we have a couple of promotions going on. If you're planning a notes upgrade, get there easily with our upgrade pack and mobilize your apps with 5 free Unplugged licenses as a perk. We're also running a promotion on mobile business continuity, our mobile business continuity application. Demo this application before June 30th to be entered to win an iPad mini. Click on the banners on our homepage if you'd like more information about these promotions. So with that introduction, I'd like to pass the presentation back to Howard so he can do a little intro about TLCC.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. Let me get my screen up here. So again, I'm Howard Greenberg. I'm a partner at TLCC with Paul Della Nevia. Paul, say hello. Maybe not. Okay, so we're going to just spend a few moments about TLCC. We do self-paced notes and domino training. We've been doing it since 1997, and
hello.
We've been doing.
Sorry about that.
There we go. You're probably muted.
I found it. Go ahead, Howard.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So when XPages came out in the early beta days, we started, working on our first XPages course, and now we have a number of XPages courses from beginner to advanced, including courses on Java, JavaScript, and so we can kind of help you along the way. We also do on-site private classes or online private classes if you wanted an instructor. And we also do mentoring and consulting as well. Our best-selling courses is our free Intro to XPages course. So if you're watching this webinar and haven't started with XPages yet, just go to our website. At the top right corner, you'll see try a free course. And there's no obligation or anything. And it is a real course. It'll take you about 3 hours to go through, and you will build your first XPages application. We also have a sale that's kicking off today where you can save a significant amount of money on TLCC's courses and packages, and the URLs there will be in your slides and the email that you get after this webinar. Coming up, as Courtney mentioned, we've got Mark is going to be talking about a project that I guess he's kind of inherited called Bootstrap for XPages. So that's a way to bring the very popular Bootstrap user interface for web browsers to your XPages applications very easily, just by basically changing the theme of your XPages app. It automatically becomes a bootstrapped web application. So I know Mark has some ideas about where he wants to take that project. Right now it's pretty cool, and I think his plans would kind of even really make it even better. So definitely put that on your calendars, information about that URL. Also, any of our previous webinars are available at that same URL. So we got webinars on basically every kind of XPages related topic. Okay, so as Courtney said, we're going to do Q&A at the end, but as you have questions, go ahead and ask them. You'll see there's a Q&A button at the top ribbon bar of the WebEx interface. Just click on that and put your questions in there. Do not use the chat. The chat we're not really going to be looking at for your questions. Use the Q&A panel, and we'll get to those at the end. Okay, so our presenters today are two people I've known for quite a while, and I really enjoy going to their sessions at Connect because, as you'll soon find out, they really take a topic and really make it kind of fun and interesting by adding a theme. Last year it was about Greek mythology, and this time the presentation you're going to see is the one on going to be themed around Dante. So let me, without any further ado, pass it on over to Paul. And I just need to find, there we go, Paul. You should be getting that presenter rights there, Paul.
Yes. Yep. Let me just. Just trying to. Okay. So hopefully now you can see my desktop.
Yeah, we see the Connect slide, the title slide.
Yep. Okay. So just a bit of introduction about me. I'm an ICS consultant at Intech Systems Limited, a business partner in the UK. We do development and application support, as well as some training and mentoring as well. I've been an IBM champion for a number of years now. Co-author, as I mentioned earlier, of the XPages extension library. Since October, I've been an OpenNTF director. And have been contributed a number of projects also to OpenNTF, and I also do quite a bit of blogging on various things.
Hi,
and
my name is Mike McGarel. I've been in the Notes Domino world for quite a while, doing different things. Moved on to XPages, and now learning and using Java every day. So it's been a great transition. I'm not a business partner, I'm a corporate developer. So I'm kind of in there using the software all the time. And I work on the Midwest Lotus User Group Conference's website. And that conference is coming up at the end of August. Forgive the plug.
Okay, so first, just a little background about Dante's Inferno. It was written in the 14th century, and it's part of three books, the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, which make up the Divine Comedy. And it's a journey by Dante over the Easter weekend down into the underworld. And it's well known for the introductory line, Lasciate ogni speranza, voi ci entrate, which means abandon all hope, ye who enter here. So we're going to structure this webinar around the 9 circles that Dante and his guide Virgil go through. So the first one that we've got is Limbo. And when we think about Limbo in the context of XPages, there's a number of areas where Limbo is quite naturally kind of fits in. The first area that Limbo relates to is Limbo applications. Now, there's no need to take an application and either have it as XPages or not XPages. There's no reason not to incorporate XPages elements into traditional Domino web applications for things like reporting. Now, from my experience, that can be extremely powerful. It does have a slight bit of work in actually reproducing the look and feel, because XPages comes with a number of out-of-the-box frameworks built into it, like Dojo and One UI, if you want to use that. Then actually reproducing the same styling does take a bit of time, but once you've got it, then that starts paying its benefits in the kind of functionality that you can add into web applications. You can also leave an existing application as it is, create a new NSF, and use that new NSF to store XPages components and just interact with the data directly from that other database. Another way that you can do Limbo with applications is adding in mobile views into it. My feeling is that mobile, unless it's a very simple application, shouldn't try to reproduce all the functionality that you have in the desktop. I remember one of the quotes from someone in the community that desktop people are looking to work in an application for about around 30 minutes, in mobile for about 30 seconds. So you're looking at kind of a much smaller footprint into the application and much less sophisticated functionality. So that's one way that you can add in XPages components into an existing application without changing how that application works. And lastly, you can have XPages in the sidebar in the Notes client. Since 8.5.3, I think it was, that's now an option natively to put into the sidebar. Before that, way back for a Notes 8.02 client, I was using an XPage in the sidebar as a web page to do reporting. And that was a standard Notes client application, just one XPage that was surfacing reporting for that application. There's also a Limbo language in server-side JavaScript. It's kind of part JavaScript, part LotusScript terminology in the Domino objects, part client-side JavaScript in terms of some of the libraries, like the internationalization library, or the date object, which is pseudo client-side, but it's actually server-side. It leverages existing JavaScript syntax, so all the method names have the parentheses at the end, as we see there. Instead of, to get the properties, it's get universal ID rather than just universal ID, as you would have in LotusScript. App formulas have commas instead of semicolons as the separator between the parameters, because it's that JavaScript syntax. And keywords like fail silent need to be wrapped in quote marks because they need to be passed as strings. Then they're not JavaScript objects. It's also useful in that many app functions are supported, and Kathy Brown's blogged about the ones which aren't. So in many ways, it's a kind of Limbo language in that you've got lots of different components from other languages that you're already familiar with. And there's also Limbo property values. So this is that custom language which many developers may not have used. It basically allows you to combine literal strings, like database title is, expression language, so that's the hash curly brace variable name dot property name, and also server-side JavaScript. So it's allowing you to combine all of those into a single computed value. Something just to point out here is that database.title there, that's using expression language to pick up the database object, which we're very familiar with for integrating with, for adding server-side JavaScript. But instead of using database.getTitle as server-side JavaScript, it's using database.title, which is stripping off the get, changing that first letter to lowercase, and that then works as expression language. Most properties will work like that. There are very occasional ones like document.isEditable, which doesn't actually have a property associated to it. It's just a method that you can call. So document.editable won't work as expression language, for example, but most other ones will. So Limbo, we're also talking about taking existing code and converting it. So here I've got a Lotus script agent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and convert it to server-side JavaScript. You could just call this agent, but it starts taking up agent manager resources. It's not particularly efficient. And actually converting it to server-side JavaScript gets you more experience of using server-side JavaScript. There aren't a huge amount of differences. And there are some things that you can do very quickly. So dim is just going to be replaced with var. And we can just do replace all on that. The space as space just needs replacing with a colon. And we then need to start adding semicolons onto the end of the lines. The semicolons aren't mandatory, but as we'll see later, it's actually part of the parsing of server-side JavaScript. We don't need the line about setting the database to the current database. The database object is a global object which we can use. We don't need set, so we'll just remove all of those. And then the other bit that is going to change and take quite a bit of time initially is changing all of the property names, sorry, all of the method names to camel case. And we'll add those semicolons on. The while statement. While is lowercase, so we need to change that to lowercase. And case sensitivity seems to be one of the key things that needs to be changed. So while doc state does not equal null, and then we need to add open the curly brace and close it at the end. And the same with the dot contact does not equal null. One of the other key differences is that get all documents by key takes a vector. So we do var keys colon vector equals new java.util.vector, and then keys.add. It's not going to give me the type head initially there. So keys.add doc state.get item value string key. And then we have
on string. The line
oh,
above you.
Yes, thank you. So get all documents by key. True will need to be lowercase in various places, so true and false as well. Get document, get first document, case sensitivity on. And we can't use dot notation, so we'll need replace item value, and I'll just copy that, and then doc_state dot get item value string key, and same for state name. And the same for last sync. Now, one of the nice things that we can do here is we can combine at formulas in there, so we can use at now. Then document.save, and then we just need to handle recycling. So we want to get the next document, then recycle the original handle with .contact, and then set that to temp contact. And the same kind of thing for state as well. And that's then converted that code from LotusScript to server-side JavaScript. So it does take a bit of time, but it's getting you used to actually using server-side JavaScript. It's getting you used to the syntax. It's getting you used to remembering to put the var for each area, remembering to put the semicolon at the end, remembering the method names, and it's getting you used to using recycle as well. So there are actually benefits of actually taking the time to convert that. So over to Mike for the second circle. Mike, are you there?
Trying to shift it though. I'm not seeing something to click to bring it over.
Paul, you have to make Mike the presenter.
Let me just so if I so Mike should now have access.
You see your screen, Mike.
Mike, I think you might still be muted.
Lust is all about wants. Wants, and this is, and what we're talking about is what the user wants. It really doesn't matter what the developer wants. It's what the user wants, because because they're the ones that are using it, obviously. And if they're not happy with it, then you're going to hear about it. And so what do the users want? They don't always know it, but what they want is something familiar. They don't want to think about things. They just want to just go in and use it and not have to worry about it. And nobody likes to read instructions. Nobody wants to read a how-to and what to click. The more you can make it obvious, the better it is. So they want it easy to use. A lot of times with some applications, maybe with an expense report, things like that, they just want to get in and get out, and that's it. So the more effective you are at writing the code to get them to do that, the better, the better you are. And they, ultimately you'd like them to want to use your app to like your app, but if nothing else, you got to make sure that they don't hate it, that they don't dread going in, because the more they dislike it, the more complaints they will have, more help desk calls, the more time wasted on fixing things that don't really need to be fixing instead of adding new features. So, and okay, something else with looks. It's very important that it looks good right away, that it moves quickly. In a person's mind, if something looks, if it looks better, they think it's a better application. And I have a link here on design principles. A lot of us are not designers, we're not front-end developers, but we need to be sometimes. So we got to make sure that we're aware of it. We got to kind of expand our horizons, and that's a large part of this presentation, is to not just be locked into writing the code for one part of thing. We got to be aware of the whole world out there, about UI, about administration, about everything, and everything that can make our app better. That's what we need to do. So there's a lot of help out there for that. There's IBM One UI that keeps changing, but there's some information on that. There's kind of the standards on that. Extension library has great stuff in there. If you don't have that, you need to be able to load that. Help application that's on OpenNTF is a great resource for, it has code in there that you'd be able to use. Twitter Bootstrap is very popular in the community and in the whole world now. So a lot of information is on there. That has a lot of pre-built styles. So you applied the code, you apply the classes to your design elements on the screen, to your divs and to your inputs and to their titles, and all that is in there. The look and feel is built in there, so you don't have to worry about that. And that makes coding and getting a nice looking page a lot faster. jQuery UI and other JavaScript libraries, they're out there. They help make things look better, help give you better ways and faster ways to get the functionality that the people want, that they're used to on these other sites. And there's just quick tweets. Just it's out there. People are talking about UI and how much things are better with a better user interface. So now for a little demo here, and this is instead of hello world, since we're going down below, we're saying hello to another world. And this is a One UI. I'm sorry, this is a Bootstrap look. This is a fixed top bar here. I just put a little something there with the name of this, Inferno. So when someone comes in here, it's very obvious what they need to do. This is a home page, not a lot of information, not confusing. So it's just what's in here is just what the user needs to do. So it gives them their two options. So if they want to fill out a form or whatever, so let's just kind of click on that real quick. And so then they see this here, and then they can fill out this, so the form's there. So it's very easy. The buttons are very clear. Everything looks real clean. So it's very very easy to use. Users should have no questions with this. And just show a little feature here, something that you can add on instead of having maybe just a plain calendar. Sometimes you might want to add a little wow factor. I mean, and this is really a little wow factor, but if I click on this calendar here, it pops up 2 months. So sometimes, especially, 1 month isn't long enough. Maybe, some things need to go a couple months. And I could have made this 3 months or 4 months. And this is using jQuery UI. It's very easy to pop in there and put that code in. So that's it for my little demo here. And Paul, let's see, let's go back to my demo. And Paul's going to talk about the next one, Gluttony.
I think that's back with you again, that one. Mike, are you still there? Right, so Gluttony, I'll just cover this one quickly. Gluttony is really about making sure that browsers don't eat too much. Because you're no longer working with the Notes client, you're working with a browser. You could be working with browsers that only have a limited bandwidth because they're not on Wi-Fi or whatever. There's this key option for using runtime optimized JavaScript and CSS resources. So that basically means that it takes all of your JavaScript code in your NSF, all of your CSS, and minimizes it, takes out all of the spaces, and really slims it down, so that when it gets pushed down the pipe to the browser, it actually runs through a lot quicker. But then at times you'll need to debug the code. So there's this check mark for use uncompressed resource files for CSS and Dojo. And that basically means that when you want to use Firebug to debug, it will still show the full code with all the spaces that you need to actually investigate and read the JavaScript more fully. It's just a key to remember to untick that before you put your application live. Fourth circle that we have is on greed, and this is about greed on the server. So just as we were cutting down the size of the code that's being pushed to the browser, we also want to manage size on the server. So we've got a number of options with performance. So we've got an option here for keep pages in memory. That means that every single page that a user comes to, it's going to keep all of those pages in memory. That's great for performance. It means that it's easier, quicker to retrieve. However, it does mean that, as with all of us, memory is limited. So you get to a point where you run out of memory. That's not an issue to do with related to recycling. This is Java memory that runs out of memory, and it can have a devastating effect on your application. So the other end of the spectrum for that is keeping all pages on disk. So that means instead of keeping in its memory, it's going to write down the details and store them on disk. It's like instead of keeping a list of names in your memory, just writing them down on pieces of paper and putting them on a table. You've got much more space that you can use, but it does take a bit longer to retrieve it. And then there's an option in between of keep only the current page in memory. So that means previous pages that a user has gone to will be stored to disk, but the current page is kept in memory. We've also got two options over on the left here, gzip persisted files. So that means when it's writing it to a disk, it's not just writing it down on a piece of paper, it's folding that piece of paper up to make it smaller so that you can fit more in there. But obviously, if you're folding up a piece of paper to make it smaller and you want to retrieve it, you've got to unfold it. So it takes a fractionally more time, but it does mean that you've got more space. And the one that's ticked usually all the time is persist files asynchronously. That basically means that when it's writing files to disk, it does so as soon as it can, and lets the browser carry on work whilst it's waiting. So if something else is writing at the same time, it keeps it in memory until it's free to write, and lets the browser carry on working. If you take that tick out, then browser sends a request, something else is writing, so the server holds on to that browser request until it's free to write, then writes, and then releases back to the browser. So you're going to have a bit more time delay. And there's also an option to save to memory when it's less than a certain size. So if you've got a small page and you're keeping only the current page in memory, you can still keep other pages in memory if they're very small. We've also got other locations for content, so you can store that content off in a completely different drive. Again, it's going to take a little bit more time to go and get it, but it may be somewhere that you've got a lot more space. And we've also got the page persistence options. So let's just run through those page persistence options. So there's the default option, which is where the whole component tree is persisted. So that means that it takes a snapshot of the whole of your X page and updates that as and when any request comes back from the browser. The opposite of that is no state. So that means that nothing is stored. So that basically means that each request back from the browser, it doesn't have any concept of what the page has been between sessions. It's basically back to stateless HTTP that we were before XPages. So that could be useful for completely read-only applications or pages. There's an option for Delta, which is it stores changes since the page has been loaded. So it takes the snapshot of the overall page and makes any changes, sends that off to the browser, and then discards that snapshot. When a request comes back in, it makes a note of what's been changed and keeps that in its memory, but each time goes and gets the default page format back from the underlying design. It doesn't keep any of that in its memory. It just keeps what's been changed. And then we've got Delta X, which stores the full component tree for the current page and just changes for the others. And as well as setting that on application level, we can also set it at an XPage level as well. There's also a XSP property for xsp.session.transient, by default that's true, but if you set that to false, then it's like that setting of none. It basically makes your XPage stateless. Now, that can be good if you've got a read-only application, but it's not really going to be good if you've got something with views, for example. Because when you want to go to the next page, it won't go to the next page from the current page. It will go to the next page from the default page. So if you start off with page 1 and click Next, it will go to page 2. If you click Next again, it will go to the next page from the default, which was 1, so it will go to 2. You won't be able to go to 3 without clicking on 3. And the same with toggling. So there are going to be places where that may be useful. There are going to be places where it adds extra flexibility, but it may mean that you have to code some functionality around it, like instead of having a pager that does next, it just has a pager that has all the various pages, and the users just click on one of those. So fifth circle we've got is Roth. So this one is back to Mike again. So I'll just stop sharing. And Mike, over to you.
Button there, keep sliding out of the way. All right, we're gonna talk about RAS, and go back over here. Trying to follow. Okay, RAS. RAS in terms of user experience would be responsiveness, because the more responsive, and that's a very popular term now, and there's a lot of different definitions for it. But if RAS is anger, then it makes the user less angry. There's less things to annoy the user, less things to get them frustrated. And a lot of that has to do with speed, because that's probably the biggest complaint of users. Things just aren't fast enough, where it just doesn't, either doesn't load fast enough, or a new page doesn't come up enough, or changes don't show up right away. All that can lead to more complaints. And there's a lot of ways in XPages to avoid that. One way, and it's very easy, built-in partial page refreshes, where you could just say, instead of refreshing the whole page, you just do the section that changes. So you just do the, maybe just a particular cell, maybe maybe a button appears, and just so it's a little section page, a div in HTML term that is displayed or not displayed, depending on what you choose. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You can use client-side processing to speed things up, the actual JavaScript. So instead of going back to the server, maybe you can just use your UI changes within the browser. And there's a lot of different frameworks for that. And if you wanted to go in, and if you wanted to use server-side processing, Java is a very fast way, especially with beans. I mean, it's a little more work on your part, but it's definitely great for studying. And it's definitely great to study that. And again, you'll get beyond the XPages world. The more Java you know, you'll be more familiar with code that's out there and used in so many different sites. Another part of this is meeting the user's expectations. They're out on the web. They're going to all these different sites. They're used to things working a certain way. They're used to being connected all the time, and you don't know how they're going to be connected. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't know if they're going to be on their phone, on an iPad, on another tablet, on what kind of desktop they have, a large screen, small screen. You just don't know. So a good way to do this is to be responsive, to make sure that whatever they have, you're doing the best job you can to match that device. I would have an example of that in a minute. Another way, in terms of IBM, say with connections, they have what's now called the embedded experience, where forms can be put within email and can be put with it on the page, so users don't have to go to a separate site. So that's one less step for them. It could be, you could build a form right into their email, so that'll save them time. It'll be one less place to go, one less thing for them to think about. So a little demo of that is, let's pop up here. I'll go back to this form here with the page. And I showed you, pop-up they might want something instead of this is code that you could add in here to help them. You could gather all their user information. If they're logged in, you know what it is. You can create a button that says populate everything, and then boom, the information pops in there so that they don't have to type all that in. That saves them steps. They may not show their appreciation, but users will appreciate that. And then something else you might want to have a button to clear everything in case they need to start over, fill something out. And again, that code is just, it doesn't take too long to write, to just tell each field to empty out, but it helps the user out, and it makes them happier when they're using your application. Something else I have here is this button here. Again, this is showing, you're not making the users think, you're making it easy for them. The button to submit it is right here, very obvious. But the cancel button, it's over here, it's not as obvious, but you can't mistake the two. They probably won't accidentally hit cancel instead of the submit. So something like that would be very helpful for users. Again, it helps them prevent mistakes. And I wanted to show a little bit of this code here. So we'll just kind of pop that up. For the date picker, I just want to show how easy it is to write code. It's not a lot of code to change that date picker, where I'm using the jQuery UI framework, and I'm using, so there's some jQuery code. I check a location. I'm loading a different location file if it's not the United States. But then this is the part here. I'm getting the field name of the, in this case, it's delivery date for that. And here I'm just showing that the number of months by default, all my pickers right here is 2. And then minimum date, I set that so they can't pick something that's too soon. So that helps the people that are going to be getting this email, that they don't have to do something right away if that's not in your business logic there. So I want to show that that's in there. And with the Bootstrap, I want to show how easy it is to make it responsive. I'm going to put some code here I set, and this is on the home page, but this is, I set a class for row for this one div, and then I have 2 divs inside there, and they have this thing it's set up columns to be 6 wide. Bootstrap is built on a 12-column framework here. So I got a 6 and a 6, and I have this invite the same way, where it's 6 and 6. So this is 6 columns, and this side 6 columns. But Bootstrap knows that if you have a smaller device, if it needs to get shrunk, I'll just do this easily and close the browser. You'll see that it automatically, the div that was on the right automatically goes underneath the other one. So it all stays together. So it doesn't matter what device they have, this form will show up on that device and fit on there. And that's it for that. So hopefully that will keep your users from trying to avoid your site. I'm going to switch it back to Paul, and he's going to talk about Heresy.
So, Heresy. for anyone who's worked with Notes for a number of years, like myself or Mike, using that four-letter word Java was a bit of a partly terrifying, partly a thought that IBM were always wanting us to always wanting to push us in the direction of Java. So I just wanted to show this slide just to give you an idea of how actually there's clear evidence that that's not the case. So the JVM itself, the underlying Java version that's being used, at the time of release 8, up until then, it was at 1.4, then it became 1.5, and then 6 for XPages in 8.5. But the big thing there is the Notes UI APIs. So what we're used to from Lotus Script is Notes UI Workspace, Notes UI Document. They didn't come in with the Eclipse platform in release 8 when you had the Eclipse framework for the Notes client. It didn't come in with 8.5. It came in with 8.5.1. And yet those have been available for Lotus Script way back since the start of this map. So it's not a case that IBM have been wanting to push us into Java, because if they were, then those would have been available much earlier. When you look at why you should use Java, and there have been some blog posts on this since we did our session at Connect, for me it really comes down to what happens with server-side JavaScript. So server-side JavaScript is, I mentioned it earlier that it was a Limbo language. It's very much a kind of pseudo language. It's not a language as Lotus Script or Java is. It's basically just a set of rules for parsing a string. So if that string or part of that string starts hash curly brace JavaScript colon, it means take everything from there, keep splitting it on semicolons until you've got a closing curly brace that closes that section, and pass it to the server-side JavaScript parser. Pass any @commands or any objects to the variable resolver. So database, for example, gets passed to the variable resolver. @now gets passed to a variable resolver. And look for the corresponding variable name, or which will be a Java object or a Java method. So @now will be a Java method to get the current date time. Database will be a Java object that corresponds to the current database object. And then it keeps splitting it down, taking those objects, passing it to the variable resolver, calling a method, getting the result, passing that on, so on and so forth, until it's got a result. So if there's all of that parsing of strings that's happening, once you're familiar with server-side JavaScript, why not just go straight to the source? And I want to show you that that's not particularly, it's not too scary. So I'm going to take that server-side JavaScript, which I had earlier, which I'd converted from Lotus Script, and I've gone to my Java class, and I'm just going to paste that in. Now, it looks quite terrifying for a start. We've got lots of errors, but most of them are on the variable declarations here. First thing to remember is that the Java classes, whereas the LotusScript and server-side JavaScript ones start with notes. The Java ones don't. So we just need to take what's to the right of notes, get rid of the rest, and put that in the place of var. And the same for here, for contacts. And the same for document collection. Same for document. Now, the other nice thing that you're seeing there is that it's showing where there are errors. So there it's saying that it doesn't know what database is. Well, with the extension library, there's a nice utility class called xlibutil that allows us to get the current database. So we can paste that in there as well. When converting from LotusScript to server-side JavaScript, we had to do a lot of changing of cases. We don't have to do any of that once we come to Java. Again, we've got a variable declaration here, so we just move that to the start. And all of the syntax there is exactly the same. Again, we'll have to specify those as documents. And we can't use that formula in Java. So we've got a little bit of extra work to do here. So we need to pass in a datetime object. So datetime now equals, and how do you create a datetime object? Well, it's the same way that you do in LotusScript. xlibutil dot get current session to get the session, and then it's session dot create datetime. So we can use a calendar, a datetime, or a string. We'll use the date, the Java date object. So that's created a Java date. We're storing it in there, and then, as with everything else, the important thing is to recycle that date. Yep. So we've got that date then recycled, and that's all the changes that we had to do. So converting from LotusScript to server-side JavaScript took quite a bit of time. Converting from server-side JavaScript to Java is considerably quicker. The IDE helps a lot. You get that type ahead support straight away, all of the various objects. So it's much easier once you're comfortable with server-side JavaScript to go to writing that in Java. It's just things like getting around options for @now, string handling, which might be you can't use @text or cstra as you would use in LotusScript, but there's a useful class called string utils, which is extremely useful for manipulating strings. So actually converting from server-side JavaScript to Java is very straightforward. Once you go from there, then the next step is to look at the OpenNTF Domino API. So the OpenNTF Domino API is a framework on top of the Domino Java objects. We'll see that for the normal Java objects, if you hover on create date time, then it gives you nothing really about it. One of the aims of the OpenNTF Domino API was to add that kind of documentation in, and that's one of the things that I'm going through at the moment. Garbage collection, so automatically recycling, so you don't need to recycle. It's got the XPages OpenLog logger stuff in there, so you can handle logging without adding any additional code into any additional classes that you need to add into your application. Auto boxing. We had a situation here where we needed to add a date into a field, and we had to create a date time object and pass that in. Well, the OpenNTF Domino API allows you to just pass a Java date in there, or a Java calendar, and documents and maps. So you can use .put instead of .replace item value. Iterations for document doc::dc, and just do your functionality. It means that you can't create an infinite loop when you're looping through documents. It will handle all of that for you. Transactional processing, email helpers, document scanner, database listeners, so you can do functionality every time a document is saved, and also sync helper. So we had all this code to basically iterate through states and update various fields onto the contacts. There's quite a lot of lines of code there, even in the Java. With the OpenNTF Domino API, we've got something called a sync helper. So we create a map of fields or formulas from the source document, from the state, and fields on the contact to update. We create a new document sync helper, pass in that map, tell it how to update, whether it should create and replace, or whether it should just create or just replace. Tell it where to find the contacts to update, so all contacts by state, and what field to use from the state document in order to find the related documents. We then get the collection of states and do helper.process, and it will go through an update. If there are any that you skip over, then it won't save them. It's much easier for updating large amounts of documents than coding it all manually. The seventh circle, we've got violence. So themes, and themes are extremely powerful. We covered them last year, and I learnt I hadn't really used themes until I saw a session in 2010 by Tim Tripponi, and they are extremely powerful. You've got a method for any component called getStyleKit_family, which gives you the default theme ID. And Mark Lusink's debug toolbar actually allows you to see the theme ID for individual components. But some elements can't be manipulated easily. So event handlers don't have a default style kit. You can add a theme ID to an event handler, but there's nothing that you can create in a theme that will override all event handlers. You'll need to go through each event handler and add a theme ID. So what about if you want to add some functionality for all events? Well, Dojo standby control on OpenNTF allows you to do that. So it basically adds a standby when it's running any code. Let me just So if I go to this page and log in again, and then when I click Update Contacts, it's adding this nice mask onto the page so that the user can't double click the button or click somewhere else and try and do anything. And it's adding that automatically to every single event. So that's done with this CC standby. So it's using a Dojo module, and then it's a script lock, which is basically adding a JavaScript event to happen every time a partial refresh is triggered. So you don't need to make any changes anywhere else in the application. Drop this onto your layout page, and you've got that styling. You can stop people double clicking. As soon as they click, then this fires off if it's a partial update, and it stops all of that double clicking without you needing to add a theme onto each event handler. So for fraud, we'll just go back to Mike.
Talking about the Infernal here, but I got to say, you working on documentation, I think that makes you a saint. No one else is willing to do that kind of stuff. All right, we're going to talk about fraud. This is something that surprised me definitely, and many others in the community when we found this out. But session scope, despite its name, is not for the whole user session. It's not, for one, it only applies to the current application that you're in, and that's not so bad. And so you're within the application is kind of what's going on right now, but it's not tied into the user specifically. It's tied into the browser session. So if someone logs in and they're doing whatever they need to do, and they log out, and someone else comes in with that same, using that same browser, and even if they're logged in with a different name, they're going to have whatever variables you put into the session scope, whatever information is in there, that will be reused unless you specifically clear it out ahead of time. If you check to see if the user is the same or some other thing is the same, and then reset it. So that is something that is very surprising. So you can check on cookies, since Domino 9 cookies are HTTP only, so you can't get rid of them. So you can't get rid of the cookies this way in Domino 9.0 and beyond. But you can create your own cookie, and on OpenNTF, which is a wonderful, wonderful place, as opposed to the Inferno, is a wonderful place to find all kinds of information. If you haven't checked that out, definitely go there. So there's a snippet there to add your own cookie. And now we're going to go to the last circle, treachery. And Paul, I'm sending it back to you.
Okay, so treachery. When we're talking about treachery here, we've all been basically the Domino Designer client has been our lifeblood, really, for a number of years. So treachery, it feels like treachery when we start looking outside of Domino Designer. And there's a few areas that I want to mention here. So we've gone down the road from LotusScript to server-side JavaScript to Java. And one of the things that you can do once you get to Java is something called Java docs. And I'm very familiar with them at the moment from doing the documentation for the OpenNTF Domino API. So to generate the code, you just use select anywhere in a particular method and do Alt, Shift, and J, and it generates a method code. So that one there looks fairly bland, but when you have one with particular methods, and we haven't got one here, then it adds in those parameters. If you have a return type other than void, then it adds that in. And then you can start adding additional documentation in there. Now, you can't generate that documentation from an NSF, but you can do from a non-disk project. There's a link on the slide for where all of that is. But what do you get when you get out? Well, you get something like this. So we've got the various packages that we can switch between. We can see all the nested classes within there. So I've got a couple of nested classes. There are some fields referenced, and there are methods, and it gives the return type, all of the parameters and their types, and the first line of the description. But then we can click down to individual methods and get something that's much more significant. So this is where it was automatically creating those parameters and return values. So in the Java, that's @param doc, and then the information in @return doc. You can also have @throws. Those ones will automatically get generated. You can use @link to link off to other methods or other other classes. @since to give a version number that was added into. And I've deliberately gone down to a couple of methods here for isUnique and getBeDoc, simply because those are two that I developed for my Java code internally, and they've now been added into the OpenNTF Domino API. So there's I think it's xsputils.getBeDoc and view.isUnique to check whether a document is unique within that view. So once you start building those libraries up, then the next step on is when you start getting used to having a go at creating plugins, you can actually store that code in a plugin that is available across the whole server. So we're then starting to take something which was a piece of code that was in LotusScript, only accessible from LotusScript, to something that's in server-side JavaScript, so accessible within XPages, to Java, so it's accessible within Java and server-side JavaScript, to outside of the NSF, to across the whole server. And it's generating that documentation for you. There's also something called Eclipse Modeling Tools, which allows you to create visual designs of your application. So again, adding in that documentation element. And when we're coming to source control, then there's Atlassian source tree and Perforce P4 merge. Perforce P4 merge allows you to compare two design elements or different versions of the same design element and see where the differences are and merge them around much more easily. Declan Lynch and I did a show and tell on that. The slides for that show and tell cover all the installation for on-premises, but I also did a Notes in 9 earlier this year on using source tree and perforce people merge. So I'd recommend having a look at that. And here's the link to that slide that goes into much more detail on going beyond Domino Designer to using Eclipse, using some of the Eclipse functionality within Domino Designer on disk projects for generating Java docs, and going out to source tree and P4 merge. So we've gone through a long road there, and we're now back out into the light. So just in summary, and Mike jump in if you want to on here, but basically XPages is it's not only giving you skills that are applicable to XPages, it's giving you skills that are applicable beyond XPages to web development, to Java development, Android development, whatever.
We're not just Notes Domino developers anymore. We're web developers, and we have to be aware of everything out there. You know, cascading style sheets and HTML and different JavaScript libraries and relational databases and getting information from a lot of different sources.
Yeah, and yes, it is a big journey. It's one that I think Mike and I are still on.
Yes, oh, very much so.
But it's an exciting journey, and it's more manageable if you take those small steps.
Right.
I never recommend new XPages developers diving straight into using Java unless they're already Java developers. It's something to build your skills up slowly and learn from what others have done. There's a whole host of materials out there. Loads of Notes in 9 episodes. Right.
Yeah, I was about to say that, but a lot of presentations from Connect and other conferences. If you're able to go to other conferences, the local, the smaller ones, the user groups, or the more local ones in the United States, or the few conferences, wherever, there's a lot of great information out there.
Yeah, and it's getting you prepared for the great beyond. I mean, one of something that we haven't mentioned is connections. But once you're familiar with JavaScript, once you're familiar with XPages, if you want to use Java, then all of those languages are available for speaking to connections.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we never know what's out there in the future, what you're going to need to know, and the more you know, the better off you'll be and the better prepared you are.
Yes. Yep.
Technology changes way too fast.
So I think that's everything.
All right.
From us.
Yeah. The Mastering XPages book is, here it says due shortly, but it's out now. So the second edition.
Yep.
Paul, could you pass over the presentation privileges to Howard?
Yes.
And there are a few questions that we can get into.
Okay, so let me repeat again how you can ask questions. So at the top of your monitor, there should be a drop-down ribbon bar, your WebEx interface, and one of those buttons is going to be a Q&A button. If you don't see it, there might be a more buttons or more actions available on the right side of the drop-down arrow. So choose the Q&A and ask your questions that way. I believe we have a few questions up there already.
Yeah, so that first one about using Java classes that are used for XPages in Java agents. Yeah, there isn't really an easy way. One, about the only way is to copy those Java classes into the agent itself. Dots is another option, but again, those Java classes need to be in a separate area. One of the things that we're looking at with the OpenNTF Domino API, and it's not going to be there in the short term, is actually making it possible to actually code Dots tasks within an NSF and use those Java classes. But that's definitely a kind of longer term thing. But that's the ideal to get to, that you can use the same code in XPages and scheduled processes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Paul, you got a question?
Yes, a question from Sergio. Do all of these techniques apply to XPink apps? Now, I know that many of them do. Let me rephrase that. Which of these techniques don't really apply to XPink applications?
I think they all apply, but you may well need to deploy plugins to the Notes client for things like the Bootstrap, for example. But that can be done with profiles and a widget catalog. There's a number of kind of easy ways around that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. And we got a question from another, actually a question from Dexter. Is the org.opentf.domino only for Notes 9?
It's actually only for 901. Because it's built on top of the Java, the Domino Java classes. As and when new ones are added in, those ones aren't available in the old ones, and so it throws errors. There are only a handful that were added in with 901 around the calendar. Ironically, it's actually Notes calendar objects, even though they're Java. I'm not sure quite why the terminology slipped in there, but I do have a version that's specifically for 9.0 instead of 9.01. And actually creating that didn't take a huge amount of time. I've done some investigation on porting it back to 8.5.3. There's quite a lot that was added in 9, so there's quite a number of bits that need to be taken out in order to get it working on 8.5.3.
Okay.
Okay.
I've got one here, Howard. I have a question from Paul, and this is Paul, but this question might be for the other Paul. Using Notes 9 or using the Notes 9 client, how can I make my XPink applications faster?
There's some options for preloading databases. I'd also recommend, as much as possible, if you're using XPink, make sure that you're on as recent a version as possible, because IBM have constantly done some work around XPink and performance. You can use run applications on server in XPink, but you need to set preferences in each Notes client, and I blogged about that a few weeks ago. And that may make it faster. Beyond that, it's really about looking at optimizing performance of your XPages. So when it's doing the partial refresh, cutting down the amount of the screen that it's running on, using exec ID to minimize what the server is actually running on, and probably also looking at making sure the jvm.properties has an appropriate setting for the memory. I'm not sure, I can't remember what the default setting is for 9 for a Notes client install, but older versions, it started off with 48K and just added up 4K each time. So, it had quite a low maximum threshold. So actually increasing that may help performance.
Yeah, actually, we did do a webinar in December on performance, and so if you go to our site, you can get the replay of that webinar on YouTube, and the slides are available. And so, that would give people a lot more detail on the performance issues for not just XPink, but for the, I think we did mention a few things about XPink, but just XPages in general. Okay, I think we're going to close just with a comment from Don for our presenters, Mike and Paul. He said, thanks, nice job, and excellent information.
Okay.
So I'd like to thank,
Right.
I'd like to thank Mike and Paul for donating their time to present their session. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and hopefully, I hope your rest of the day is a great one. Take care, everyone.